Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday to everybody. Welcome to the Rant today. I am pleased to announce that you may have seen on any of the, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or on YouTube, that my new permanent, not even guest, co-host now, she would be someone familiar to everybody, as I've had her on before, and that's Laura Colbert. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome being here. Absolutely. We're happy to have you here. Honestly, I got lonely on Thursdays, the first Thursdays. I needed someone to ping stuff off of. And for those of you who don't know, and nobody does, Laura and I used to have coffee pretty much every week. And we're like, you know what? We need to take this to the show. We need to take it to the reel. So we have done that. And so welcome, Laura, and welcome everybody else today.
Thank you.
How was your week? How you doing? Good?
Great. Awesome.
Yeah, you just got back off vacation, right?
Yeah, we went to Outer Banks in North Carolina. Road trip.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Very, very good. Well, listen, today we got a good one for you. It's one that, man, it's maybe the how do I put this? Since the beginning of time, right? Since the beginning of time, this has happened. Since there have been humans walking on this earth, we've had discrepancies and differences between men and women. And so today we're going to talk about men and women and in the workplace, in business, and kind of what the gender gap looks like, why it's there, is chivalry dead? We'll kind of cover a lot of that kind of stuff of kind of how we go today. So Laura and I had talked about this before, and we want to make sure everybody understands that we have some disclaimers before we start today. Okay. As always, we try to keep it family friendly. Some S-bombs go down every once in a while, but our disclaimers today are we want to make sure we get this for everybody too. One, there are no absolutes in life. So when we talk about things today, about what we've seen and what our experience come from, it's just an experience. It's something that we've seen. We will obviously talk about our opinions about things, but the truth is that there's no absolutes. Everything's different. We've got X billion people in the world, so the cultures are different. So we want to make sure that we're not talking absolutes. Number two, everybody, good, bad, or others, whether they are going to have biases, are going to have stereotypes, and we're going to have obstacles to overcome, that they have done that.
Right.
We recognize that fact that it's happened. We recognize that there are different things that creep in that let you believe or have led you to where you are about your thoughts on stuff. So we're not taking that away. We also know not all stereotypes and biases are bad, and some of them are true. So again, keeping it open and honest here and raw, like we like to do on the Rant. Number three, we're going to try to keep politics and religion out of it. Right? There's however many political brands there are out there now, and there's 3,000 religions in the world. So we're going to try to keep that out as much as we can. We know there'll be some stuff because there are things that are influencing that in the way that we talk about stuff. So if it does creep, we're not going to take a side to it in any way, shape, or form. And then lastly, and this is kind of important too, is that we're going to try to keep it USA centric if we can. So we know between men and women and roles in different cultures, there are very different things. America, land of the free, home of the brave, right? We want to try to keep it at least in that perspective, so that when we talk about this, it's not something that, again, no absolute. So we understand cultures are very different. So it's not our job to impose on that. So that being said, I'm going to start off by saying how this all started, by the way. So we had a coffee one day. And Laura, being the author that she is, not only of her book, but she wrote a LinkedIn article, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think, yeah, on Mother's Day. And I'm going to let you tell the experience, but let's just say I immediately called her and said, and I waved the BS flag. And I said, wait, no. And so it was great because I got her all riled up, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So I'll let you tell your article because it was a good article. It's not that it wasn't. But we'll start there and then we'll branch off. Sound good?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my article was about being a leading mom, or a leader mom is what I called them in the article, and how difficult it can be to carry on the burden of both roles, but not.
Sorry.
Is that me? Is that
No,
you?
it's not. It was me.
Okay. But not necessarily difficult because they're trying to navigate both their family and the work, but because of some of the biases that come at them from people they work with. And so the example I gave in the article was when I was in the process of accepting the role as the middle school principal, I was asked by two different superiors whether or not this was the best decision for my family. And I got a little emotional about it
Offended?
because I felt like they would never have asked a man that same question. They would have said to the man, "This is great for your family, not is this the best thing for your family?" Because I have three very young children. When I was accepting the role as principal, I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. I mean, they're little, but at the same time, my direction in my career was this was the next step, and this is what I wanted from my family, and this was the best thing for my family. My husband was a stay-at-home dad and a realtor, and so it worked out great that he could do both those things and I could do my job, and we had our kids and our family life taken care of. And so there's this assumption that with working moms, we always have, or not always, sorry, that's a
Here we go.
we have an assumption sometimes that these working moms should still be the at-home moms as well, or have primary role of the household and of their kids. And so the whole goal of the article was how do we start to get rid of that mindset, or at least stop with the biases and those subtle comments. Um, and also I talked a little bit about, making sure that the maternity and the paternity leave both look good. Making sure that there is a nursing room within your facility so that a nursing mom doesn't have to ask for it or go sit on a toilet and pump or, do all of these really uncomfortable things. They can still work and sustain their family, and it's embedded in your business already. It's you as a leader already accepting the working moms as they come and as they are, and not making it an issue.
Yeah, so I think, and so I don't think we didn't get into the and for all our viewers, we didn't get into the extras of like, look, should you have a pump room for people? Yes. Should you have a breastfeeding room for people? Yes. Should you be able to have a freezer to store milk if they have to? Absolutely. Like all those things to me is very simple. I worked labor and delivery actually, and I worked in the NICU, was one of my first medical jobs. So
Awesome.
completely understand that whole side of it. I was actually my wife will she will laugh at this, and she was like, I was a breastfeeding consultant. I went through the class, and she's like, I wouldn't let you near my, like, in that regard. And I was like, listen, I understand what lanolin can do. I get it. I used to have to promote it. So on that side of the thing, I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't say that's easy to do. Where I jumped all over her was the fact that I said, I thought my concern, and again, the context of the person who was asking you had told me what you didn't believe necessarily that it might have been of this sexist nature that it was being asked, whether on purpose or not. Just you thought that it was potentially was coming from that point of view versus a point of anything else, right? So what I told her was, and what my kind of thing was, is that I thought that the question should be asked regardless of who is sitting in front of them, whether it was Laura as a woman or whether it was another man. I thought that if you're in that job, or you're going for a high, I would say there was probably no working hours attached to that job necessarily. There might have been, but you knew it was going to go over, and you knew things were going to bleed in other places, and you knew there was going to be times when there was going to be on-call emergency spokesperson. This is all you had to do, right?
Yeah.
My from Laura's point of view as a woman, obviously I've I've never been in a woman's shoes, right? Well, that's not true, but I'm not a woman. Let's put it that way, right? So I couldn't talk from that perspective. From a leadership perspective, though, I could tell you that I think that question is absolutely valid for a man or a woman because of the position and what it was going to entail.
Mhm.
Again, he was thinking it more because you're a woman. Now, what we further got into for all of our viewers, which I thought was important, and I'm gonna put working moms
Wait,
on here because I want to
Flip,
talk
did
about
you hold on? Did you
Go ahead.
did
Go
I
ahead.
differentiate when I said my superiors? Did I ever say a man asked me this, or did I just say my superiors? Because you just made an assumption that it was men.
I thought you told me it was a man.
Well,
Was
I
it
told
not?
you privately, so I guess okay, yeah,
Oh shit! Yeah, no, I knew that it was a man. Yeah,
okay,
yeah, because if it was a woman, would also that's a great thing. If it was
right.
a woman asking you that question, would you have felt different? Yep.
I don't know. I haven't
Yep.
thought about it.
Because it's the same thing. Then you're going, well, she's been in my shoes. She understands. She's asking me because she cares about the things that we have to care about.
But she might preface it by saying, "Okay, so I was a working mom too, and here's some of my hurdles. Have you thought about these?" Right?
Totally. Which would have been completely different how you would have taken it. But the core of the question was, look, this could be. So I told Laura too, and I'll tell everybody else, when you get to be a command level person in the military, and I'm speaking for the Navy, but I'm pretty sure that all of them do. They bring you into leadership school. For ours, we could bring our spouses, men or women, didn't matter, or husband or wife, didn't matter, to those things, and they would have an extra class that was now. Oddly enough, it was a pink booklet that you got, and so my wife thought that was absolutely she hated it. But what they were trying to do is say, hey, look, your life's going to be different at this point. The normalcy that you've had, your spouse is now starting a job where there are no working hours, there's responsibilities, right? And I think that's what you were facing, a job that was going to have responsibilities and not working hours.
Yes.
So we just did it, right? We just did all of our disclaimers just came out, right? We made an assumption that it was going to be a certain way. And if a woman would have asked you that, now here again, I'll go back to no absolutes. There are plenty of women, and I have a couple, one of my best friends has his wife. They just don't want kids. She's strictly about working and she wants to do that and she wants to be successful. And that's just not part of their plan. Totally 1000% fine. She couldn't talk in that same concept as another mom, right? So, I mean, again, we have all this is, and I think this is the whole point to it. You could dissect everything, and there are differences for every single thing. If you take the sexism out of where you definitely felt it was coming from, regardless, and said, if you're going for a job of responsibility and not working hours, and you have a family, I think it's a very valid question to say, do you understand because if I framed it to you and said, hey, Laura, I just want you to know what you're getting into, right? And what that's going to mean. And I didn't mean it because you're a mom. I meant it because it's just the job. I think you take that very differently than if you took it.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And I think
here's the other side of it. I know that they were coming from a good place, right? I know that they weren't asking me this question to put my head somewhere else in this like demeaning or sexist or women are lesser than type of place. I acknowledge that. I think it just saddened me that I knew that if I was a man with a young family, they wouldn't have asked me this question. And I think that's just the part that gets to me. And as a woman who's always been in roles that are primarily for men, so I was a PE teacher, I was a military police officer in the military, I've grown up with two brothers. I'm always getting comments on a regular basis about like, oh, you're actually a girl that can do this, or you're actually a woman that can handle this, or I'm so glad you're the woman on my team, so that these comments start to compound after a while, and you become more aware of them. Like when I was principal, I became principal at age 35. There were many, many, many men who were the same age as me, and lots who are even younger as principals. But I cannot tell you how many times people looked at me and they're like, oh, you're really young for a principal. I don't think they would have said that to a 35-year-old man. there are 35-year-old superintendents, you know? So again, like just these constant comments that I wonder if
So let me ask this question. Is it special to be a woman? So hear me out on it. Right? I'm not gonna make you answer that question. But here, right, because you don't know anything else. And again, no absolutes, no biases. I completely understand that we have
Right.
transgender and everything that's happening. So I'm not, that's not
I don't think
right.
I just think it's not that it's special to be a woman. It's that I just wanted at some point to be a principal or some point to be a leader or some point to be a military police officer and not to
Yep.
be differentiated because of my biological gender.
So this is what's tough, right? What's tough is that you have people fighting for women's rights. We have that going on. And again, we said we're not going to get political. We have these things in our country that is literally divided on the fact of whether you have a uterus or whether you have, right, testicles, right? There's a complete whole thing about that, about whose right it is to do anything. And we have these healthcare issues and all this kind of stuff that's happening. There is, and listen, this is almost, there's a line about like everybody wants to be equal at the same time that everybody wants to be special, right? You know what I'm saying? Like more, and I think Morgan Freeman said this. I don't want to say it as right. I've heard it over the years that he did, and he was like we can't look towards equality if we're having our own BET awards, right? Like why, right? And I don't know if it was that kind of exact wording that he said and whether it was him, but I had heard that, and part of that resonates because it resonates a little bit because yes, there is racism back from that is still there, and everybody's saying, well, it's just the best person, everybody's equal. It doesn't always work like that, and whether you want to argue it or not, it's almost inarguable when you really look at it. At the same time, though, if you want to be different and you want to, right, so then there's this fight all over the place about, well, because listen, so truth be told, my history was raised by a really strong mom, which was great. And my first four military duty stations all had female commanding officers.
Awesome.
So right, and I was medical field, so it was heavy in and women were heavy in medical anyways. But I had my most influential leader was Tracy Sherrill. She was a master chief. She gave me her E9 pins when I left the thing as an E5. One of the most influential people I've ever had for that. I didn't look at her as a woman. I looked at her as a leader, right?
And that's what she wants, probably.
Correct.
Or wanted. Yeah.
Potentially, right. Yeah, I'm sure that was the case because she probably fought through all the stuff, right? Because there is fights all over the place, right? You struggle and you have challenges because you are these things that you're facing, whether they're real or not, you're perceiving it as a challenge for yourself because you're feeling a certain way, right? And you obviously are like, well, would you ask a man that? If the question is yes, the answer is yes. I mean, there's definitely different ways to take a lot of the stuff of saying, look, you just look really young. Like, that should be a good thing, but I get it, right?
I know, people are pissed, like, Laura, take that as a compliment. Really young.
Right? But I mean, it's really tough. So here's something that I think plays into this. And I'm going to tell you all, it's probably your own fault. Ready for this one? Ooh, I just went there, right? I don't think moms value themselves as moms as much as they should. I just don't. And again, this is a very personal opinion.
So maybe identify as a mom as much as they should. Is that what you're talking about?
No. Value their job as a mom, right? Because so I can tell you from three different perspectives. One, I can tell you my current job, being at home all the time, I have now taken on the duties that my wife once had when I was always out and working, right? Or when I was on deployment. I now see those things, and it's work. Let's just put it that way. Hands down, it's work. I
Absolutely.
don't give a shit what people say. It is work. But I don't think women value themselves enough for that either, right? And that's part of it. That's a societal thing that society doesn't like. We don't give credit to you know this. We don't give credit to teachers enough, right? Of what they do. They have our kids during the day, and they're making them educated. We don't value that enough. We value someone who makes $25 million a day on clean coal or whatever, right? I mean, we value those people way much more than that, and we look at them like that as a stature thing. What is more basic and what is more meaningful of a job than being a mother and a father, period?
Absolutely.
Exactly. There's none. So the value of those things probably is undervalued too much. Now, typically in our society, how it's been and how the USA has been, typically the wife did stay at home and was raising the child. That was kind of those duties. It was never looked at like that though back then, right? And I think that still is permeating in, where I think women, this is my opinion, my wife would tell you, I just do it. This is just what I do, right? She just does
it. Has to get done. We just got to do it.
Correct. And there's a good book my best friend was reading. It's called Fed Up, and it was a woman's perspective on when that pile of clothes sits in that basket and it doesn't get taken out, what that means to her, right? And even though that was folded and it was done, and all you're asking maybe your husband to do is put it away, and I'm totally guilty of it. I do it all the time. But like it was good in that sense of it gave a perspective of that side of it all, which you could look at and go, okay, it is what it is. So, but I think there is, because a working mom to me, now you're doing double duties if you're not, right? And Katie and I have always split duties, and we've changed duties over time of me being home now and her being out. So I would, and again, I was deployed. So how, and I don't think you were married and didn't have any kids when you deployed. So when I deployed, I missed second grade. I missed second grade and kindergarten for the kids. She was robotic, right?
Yeah,
and she was robotic in how it was, right? It had to be that way. So, so I could understand the value sometimes easier than other people could. Some people would come home and go, you've been home all day. Why isn't the food ready? And you're like, well, hold the fucking phone, dude. Sorry. That was my first F-bomb. I'm sorry to everybody. That to me was, when you don't understand what else is happening, then right, and you don't value those extra things that get done, and that your house is cleaned, or that there may be a time when they were misses, or they just needed a day off and something didn't get like, there's value in all that stuff that you miss. And I think so part of it is just society, and I think women have a hard time valuing themselves in that respect, and I can understand why, right? Of our history.
Well, so I think it's still not good, but I think it's gotten better. I mean,
Absolutely.
Facebook, there's tons and tons of stuff on there all the time about like stay-at-home moms are working moms, and they have one of the toughest jobs there is. And so we're starting to understand this and see this.
Sure.
And to your point, Flip, my husband does a lot of the cooking, and like, thank God for that, because if he didn't, I would probably lose my top. You had said something earlier about that Morgan Freeman potential quote with like, why do we have to have special things for certain groups, right?
Sure.
And I think about that in regards to the Women Veterans Day. Like, why in the world do we have to have a separate Women Veterans Day when there's already a really pronounced Veterans Day? Like, it didn't make sense to me. But I just did a women veteran or a women's panel for the Suicide Summit in Wisconsin, where I'm from.
Yep.
And part of the conversation was there's this I am not invisible veteran photography thing happening, where they're taking pictures of all these female veterans and they're putting them up at events, and it's just to show that there are a lot of women veterans.
Sure.
Okay, so then we started getting a conversation about all these times that we as women veterans felt invisible. Like the first time when I got back from Iraq, I hadn't had a physical in 2 years. Like, that's a long time as an adult woman.
Yeah.
And so I went into the VA. I'm like, hey, I get free healthcare here now. Can I have a physical? And they're like, we don't serve women here. And yes, it was a male doctor, and he's like, we don't have those capabilities here. And then I went back to
Okay.
W-Madison
Okay.
where I was in
Hold on.
college.
So they didn't have OBGYN.
That's what he
Or
thought.
GYN,
That's what
right.
he thought. And
Okay.
then I went
All
back
right.
to W-Madison to talk about like my student loans and stuff. And the woman who was helping me there, I told her the story. She goes, there is a women's center in the VA. Like, you need to go back there and get your physical at the VA. They have the
Right.
capabilities. But this doctor literally said, we are outfitted for like 80-year-old men. Sorry, we don't serve women here. You know, and then other times walking to the VA and getting asked, who are you here to see? Or where's the veteran you're here to see? You know, and it's like, I am the veteran.
Yeah, there's assumptions.
Or, and I think I've shared this with you, the junk mail we get on home loans, because we have a VA home loan. The junk mail we get is made out to my husband, because the junk mail assumes my husband is the veteran. So with all of these, and Flip, I could go on and on and on. I mean, I was asked, did I carry a gun at war? Did I fight in a woman's war? Like, as if that ever existed, because there's these assumptions.
Yeah.
I got pulled over once, and not to get political, but I had a political sticker on my car, and but it said veterans for yada yada. And so when I got pulled over, the cop said, "Oh, is this your husband's car or your boyfriend's car?" I mean, just so I think until we can stop these assumptions, perhaps having a Women Veterans Day is necessary. And I think that's why they do have, you know, the Black History Month and the Women's History Month, and they have all these things because we're trying to create an awareness that we're not there yet. We all know that there's pay discrepancies among leadership, among CEOs when it comes to gender, right? We all know that these things exist. So how do we continue to combat that? This is the way our nation has decided to do that, by having these acknowledged dates.
I'm not. Listen, I'm not saying that. I 1000% agree that until we can get to equality, that there needs to be ways to recognize, so it's important, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not, and I don't necessarily know that when Morgan did that, and whoever or however it came out, you could say it for anything, right? Like,
absolutely,
you know, you could be like, well, I have a rainbow flag, or why have every other month be something else for somebody else. Totally understand why it's important, and that it's a part. And let's be honest, part of it is because we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and everybody believes that everybody should have, you know, everything equal, or at least it says we should be equal in all different parts. There is Princeton just did a study that we don't live in a democracy anymore, and they did a very how the classes have gone to be that the elites it's more of an oligarchy of how it works out.
You share that article with me, by the way.
Okay, I will. I'll find it.
Okay.
It just came out. I just read it. They did a big study with over like 31 years and looked at a bunch of different things, and they were like, we don't live in that anymore. And but the problem is it'll be a continuous fight forever, right? Like there isn't an end point that you can get to, because it's so we can get better, and we should try to get better, but there's a really hard, I don't know if it'll happen here in my lifetime. I don't think it will, in that kind of thing. I mean, are we ever gonna listen? And this may be chivalrous to me. I don't could care less that women are in war, right? I could care less. You could do anything. Anybody can do anything. A human is a human. You can all do the same stuff.
Amen.
I don't have a problem with that, right? I really don't. But like, if this is like saying like we talk about domestic abuse, right? And most domestic abuse, what is it, like 95% is obviously men on women, right? Okay, so I don't want to see but I don't necessarily want to see a woman in war, or a woman drugged across, by African warlords and drugged across the thing naked like that. Now, it was already horrible enough to see that happen to the Delta operators. What would that have done if it was a woman? The world would have been way more outraged about it, I would believe, because it was that way. And is that wrong? I don't necessarily know that that's wrong in that case, right? Like, how much do you want to, like, where's the equality line
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's bad. You and I got into this too, like chivalry, whatever, and however long it is. Right, go back and chivalrous, don't touch my woman, and only I could beat her. Right, there's some stupid crap that happened, centuries ago. But like, there is a line of like, right? I told you, my dad told me and said, make sure you put your wife on a pedestal, and right, and so good advice. That's what is it? Is it?
I know.
I can open my own car door. I know you can, but I'm doing it for you because it's right. Like,
I know, and it's not that I don't like those things,
right, but where do we do this?
Right. I also feel like I can hold a door open for everybody too when they walk through, right? There's a slight dichotomy there. You're right. And I don't know, it's like what I say about everything. Humans are gray zones. There's no black and white in the world of humanity. And so we just, in the end, that's why it's really important to get to know people on an individual basis.
I got to be honest. Like, if I was to, let's just use that door opening thing. If I didn't open a door for somebody, I don't think that they would be like, okay, right? I just don't. I don't feel like it would be like today's day and age. I don't feel like it would be like they would. If
you didn't hold the door open for somebody,
right? Like, no, not hold the door, but like if I was to open a car door, let's say car door for something.
Yeah.
We go to the car and I open the car door for you.
Yeah.
If I did that, I think you probably would be like, oh, cool. Like he did that, right?
Yeah,
like,
that was really nice.
Let's say we were single and we were on a date, whatever, and I opened that car door for you. Okay. But if I didn't, I don't think you would be like, you didn't open the car. In today's age, I don't think you would even, it wouldn't register for you for that. Like, I look at like Going Dutch, or what they used to call Going Dutch, or whatever the fuck, where everybody pays, right? I did my second one, so I shouldn't do that. But where you pay, like, I don't think it's as much like that anymore of like, no, we're all good. We just split the tab. If we're going to split, we split.
But if the guy says, I want to pick it up, I'd be like, okay, awesome.
Right. Thanks. Absolutely.
And if it turns out to be more of a friend thing, then I'll say, I'll get it next time,
But I don't want to say the word expected. It's more likely, though, that the guy would do that because of history being like that than it is that the woman would ever say that, right? We still have marriages which who pays for most of the stuff, at least traditionally. And it may not be like that all, right? Because we have very different marriage. I mean, but traditionally it was, so those are things that are dowries. And I just watched, actually, I don't know if you've seen it. Oh my God, The Last Duel. It's with Matt Damon and Driver and Minnie, I forgot her name, Millie somebody. But it's a modern day rape victim story. It's actually really good because it gives.
What is it called?
The Last Duel. So if nobody's seen it, I'll give you a little. I won't give it all away, but it basically ends up where it's a true story, happened in 1347 or something in like Scotland or England, and basically Matt Damon marries the I forgot her, Millie somebody, I forgot her name, and basically she ends up getting raped by Driver's character. And the way that it's presented is it gives Matt Damon's account of it, and then it stops, and then it starts almost all over again, and it gives Driver's account of it, Adam Driver's account of it, character, and then it stops, and then it gives what they say is the truth, which I thought was great, and it gives her account of what happened. And it went through a bunch of things, and the ending, the whole thing is that they have to fight over this whole thing, and if Matt Damon loses, she burns at the stake because and this is some crazy stuff where they were talking about like if you don't have an orgasm, then it's not consummated and you can't have children. There's all kinds of crap that we used to think about in 1300. But I thought it was a great example, though, of it was talking about rape, and it was talking about perception about those types of things. It was talking about man versus woman. Obviously, it was in the 1300s, so it was like very different for those things. And as much as chivalry was there, it was still a you're my wife, I'll hit you when I want you to hit you. So we're not in that time frame anymore in the country, which is in a world, which is obviously a good thing. But it's an interesting take on what's still okay to keep around and what's still not okay to keep around. Like what traditions are still good and what when it's male and female centric, right? Because take
Yeah.
business, right? We've taken business and said there are is it right to say we have traditional jobs for men and women anymore? I mean, is it?
I don't think it is. It's interesting. I've talked to a lot of business leaders who are, in the engineering world or the tech world or the male dominated businesses, and how they're trying to bring in more women. And we've got a giant foundry here
Why?
in my hometown, and they're really trying to get robotics for girls and STEAM for girls and all these things in our hometown, just so that they can widen who they have at the organization. Because
Yeah. This goes to me, and I had a great conversation with our friend Jordan, who I've had on the show
Mm,
before, and we've talked about diversity and why. I mean, Jordan will tell you, and I say the same thing. You kind of say, well, we just hire the best person, right? Which
yes.
you could make an argument for that and say, why would I want somebody who is inferior in talent or skills? Why would that happen? And you could look at resumes, and people do all the time, and unless it's very blatant that this person is a if it had a very Asian name to it, you could obviously people can make an assumptions and stereotypes
Mm,
off that stuff. But the argument would be, and we've seen this, and I've seen this with some high level hiring firms nowadays, where when you talk about talent, it's the skill set. I don't want to say it's not as important, but you being able to cultivate diversity and cultivate a clash of ideas that are going to promote for faster growth or for better growth of what you're doing is almost getting to the forefront of saying, do I need this degree here? Do I need
mm,
this? Right? Yes, there are still some things, especially in the technical world, right? You definitely need people who know how to do certain stuff. If it's an electrical engineer, I need
right.
radio frequency engineer, I need somebody who knows that. But when you look at it and you say, well, what if I could have somebody that also diversifies our team, whether it's a man, woman, doesn't matter. It ends up being better for that. Now, you also know you're catering to a bunch of different audiences, so your policies and everything have to be have to reflect that, right? I mean,
Right.
that's something
Right.
that we think about as well, right? So it's not easy. Like, it's not an
No.
easy, you
No, because
know
you want diversity, but you also want the best hire. And I think
sure.
that's why it's so important to go to like I just mentioned, these levels of when these kids are developing, how do we develop more skills to bring them in so that in 10, 15 years, we can hire the best talent that is diverse, right? How do you bring more steam into uh, central cities? And it's all of those things combined. It's when I think about society, for example, just as a whole, and really trying to reach the students who need it, the at-risk youth. So I'm putting my principal hat on right now. By the time they get to upper middle school or high school, sometimes like it's more about the environment they're in that impacts them as opposed to what we can do at school. So how do we help society and their environment so that when they get into our school, we're comparable, right? And so I have had tons of conversations, with social workers about this, and how do we continue to just support these families in all aspects of their life, not just in the school building. I think I've told you my twin brother, he's a Madison police detective and he does special victims units. So he too has a ton of, um, perspectives on the societal and just getting to the root cause of these things. And anyways, so that could impact the diversity within our organizations as well.
Yeah, when you look at the system, and you can look at the systems for anything that we can talk about, whether it's the system of how what the three executive branches of, or the branches of government now are, and they're convoluted with layer upon layer upon layer of bureaucracy, and it that's not a statement of that's a statement of fact, right? I mean, you just take policies and things, and every time someone new comes in, a new policy gets added on top of another, and then you have to read them all between, right? It's why lawyers have complete jobs security for the rest of their life, just reading those kind of things. But yeah, I would agree with you that the systems that we live in, whether it's districting and whether it's where people want to live or feel comfortable living or have the means to live in, right? Whether you're a man or, it all brings up how that is affected and how,
yes,
right, we get towards the end. And
yeah.
It's those changes are tough. Like those are long-term trench warfare, World War I type fights that you're just going to have to battle over and over. And it's just, I don't, it's like recycling, right? Like I just read a new article that like 5% of the stuff that we turn in actually gets recycled, right? Only 5% of it, because the rest of it either can't be, or recycling is pretty nominal about what it's really doing, is what I've been told, at least in plastic wise. Let's put it that way. Paper stuff America does good. I think I read an article that said it's 60%. We do about 60 to 70% of recycling paper. We're actually really good at it. Plastics suck. We can't do plastics, and it almost isn't worth the time and the effort. Yes. And I know a lot of places that have stopped actually doing recycling because of that, because it just doesn't, it's not cost effective at all, right? And so then you have to look on the bottom of the bottle. Is it a number 1, number 2, number 3? Okay, regardless of all that. You're talking about programs, though, that when you put them in place, that, like you talked about before, right? There's a woman's this, there's a woman's that, there's a woman's this. They can potentially, because the systems are working the way that they are, they can potentially divide as much as they're trying to unite, right? It can be difficult to do, right? So for awareness, of course, like, dude, we were at war for 20 years. If you don't think there's women veterans in this world, like, right?
Yeah.
It's just not. And you're right. Those small assumptions. Katie has tags on her car, license plates with veteran status on it. That's from her own DD-214. That's not from mine.
It's awesome.
Right? And it's hers because she did that. But because she has to register her own car. So I couldn't actually do it. I have my own veteran tags on my own thing. It's for disabled veterans. So, I mean, it's weird. I don't, it's just really tough. It borderlines of saying, how much do you sterilize to someone to say, don't, it's hard, making those assumptions, right? Like, and I don't want to say, do they matter? I guess they matter over time, right? The nitpicking, because I'm assuming that's what you're at, the point women or you would get to, is you'd be like, shit, everybody makes these little assumptions.
Right.
Like,
I mean, the first 2 times, it's not a big deal, but by the time you get to the 15th or 20th, like I'm 6 feet tall. Do you know how many times I'm asked if I play basketball? It's like, I mean, neither here nor there. But regardless, so we've all heard of microaggressions, and that's the whole point. It's like one time it's a mosquito bite, not a big deal. But by the 15th mosquito bite, you're itching and you're ticked off and you're angry, right? They get to you after a while, and it's unfortunate. And you don't ever want to be this person that just like blows your lid, but like finally, like you just kind of feel like enough is enough.
Yeah. I mean, how do you, I guess that, like, so, we got 15 minutes. How do you make a dent in it then? Do people just, I mean, let's take example of like just trying to assume that your husband, that Garrett was the probably shouldn't have said his name, but that your husband was the veteran, right?
Right.
Like, so in a male dominated profession, the most likely scenario, if I polled America, would be that if I had 2 people, who was probably the veteran, the answer most of the time is probably going to be the man, because it's a male.
Women are what, 10%?
Yeah, like it's really small. So if I asked you this, if there's a nurse, a school nurse, my guess is most of them are
Mhm.
women. I would assume that. I mean, I know there's tons of male nurses, so I'm not even taking. I'm not. Again, I'm not. We're not diving into the biases and stereotypes of it all. And so I guess my assumption is that people do that, right? We just know that there are some things that are like that. Then we just make the assumption because it's I
And
don't know.
pronouns slip out of our mouths without us even realizing.
Right. Absolutely.
I think, I mean, this this goes along the lines of we have 2 eyes and 2 ears and 1 mouth,
Yeah,
right? So
I
we
just
need to
told
be able to
someone that
listen
yesterday.
more and to look more and to speak less. And when we do speak, we need to pause and really be thoughtful about what comes out our mouth. Um,
Let me ask you a question. If that cop stopped you and pulled
mhm,
you over, right? It was that cop. I think it's
mhm,
you're saying, right?
mhm.
And he said the first words out of his mouth were "Thank you for your service." Would you have been surprised that he said that?
Yes.
Yep, that's what I figured. Right. So that's the other side of this whole thing. Is this the other side of it is that it's just as surprising for someone to get it right
Yeah.
than it is to get it wrong because you're not
So that's when you
right.
ask questions, though. That's when
It's
you
true, 100%.
so you said, okay, so Garrett and I are walking to a restaurant and we say, yes, we have 10% off because we have a veteran card or
It's
whatever.
our Applebee's night out.
Yeah. How'd you know? I was thinking of
I
Applebee's.
effing hate that, but keep going.
And they, instead of looking at my husband right away, they should just say, "Oh, which one of you is the veteran?" You know, like it's just that simple. Walking into
Right.
Home Depot, 10% off discount, right? They always look at my husband. So just pause and say, "Well, which one of you is better?" Okay, cool. Thank you for your service. It's not that hard. Um, and a
It's
lot.
laziness. That's
Well,
laziness, right? It's lazy, and it's not assumed that you would ask that question either, right?
right,
Like, and I think that's probably the point is that we just need to be in the spot where we're like, oh, because that's a simple one. What we're talking about right now is simple, and it really is not.
so simple.
I mean, it may be very obviously it's very personal to you because you were the veteran, and for every right you have that right, totally. But like that's a simplistic one of like to be easy about, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, there are, and to all of our viewers, we know there's so much more complicated things between men and women. Pay discrepancies, you're still getting paid 80% of them for the same exact job. I did find a stat though, which I thought was interesting, that more women now have higher educations than men do, which I thought was a pretty
mm-hmm,
interesting stat for that whole
mm-hmm,
thing.
mm-hmm.
Um, but so
Okay,
I think so that's an easy one to do that you can say, hey, we make one change and just ask who's the veteran, right? Well,
and I
thank
think
you. You know,
I I think another part of it is we need to acknowledge we all have stereotypes and we all have biases. My
sure,
head has gone towards the male in leadership positions. I'm the first to admit it. I'm guilty of it, but that's because it's the world we've lived in.
right.
So I think again, just pausing, being like, "Whoa, check out that bias I just had," or just check out that comment I just said to myself in my head, and how can I get past this? And having those inner dialogues is again kind of the first step. Like, isn't that acknowledge yourself and then
Sure.
look in the mirror and
On all fronts, by the way, acknowledge yourself, right? So that's also in my eyes. So traditionally, women. So we've done this too, right? When a woman takes a commanding and demanding career path and choices, there are 100% challenges that they face that men don't, right? I get that 100%. But we put them when they get to those positions as well. It's like, look what she did, right? Like, let's put the
mm,
top 50 women CEOs in America on the cover of Time because look what they've done for, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's this, we hold them in a different light because they've gone through the gauntlet and are doing the same
right.
things as well. I'm pretty sure they're still underpaid less than males are because I something read about that the CEOs are, but like I think that's it. As we're taking, so I'll give you an extreme that I was thinking about: women in combat, right? And
Mhm.
can they be? We found, and I know you know this personally, we found in Iraq and Afghanistan, the way that the insurgency was fighting, there was no front line and then all of a sudden, right, because the whole Jessica Lynch thing and how that was a supply line thing in the back, that they got ambushed, right? Like everybody became the front line, which was putting now women there, right? I mean, it was
Didn't
that
matter what
way.
your job was.
Right.
The
It
fact that
didn't
we
matter.
the fact that we still use the term front line, it's so archaic. And
Yeah. I think the way we're fighting it, I would agree with that point. I mean, I would still argue tip of the spear is completely fine to say, because you would think about it as first time in, and there are things to that nature of it. But I would agree with you that the lines are blurred as to what everybody was on the front line, right? There was everybody had to be ready.
In our fobs, and
right.
we were getting killed outside the
right.
the green zone. It happened everywhere.
Yeah, and I now translate that back to the back in the USA. You kind of look at it and you say, if every job in America is pretty much integrated, right? Like if we're integrating SEALs and Delta and all those types of jobs, then there's not many jobs that aren't integrated that women aren't allowed in or whatever. And there's definitely not jobs that men aren't allowed in. There's definitely things, different ways that I think you just fall under traditionalism of like, look, I did this job because here's the thing, right? I love teaching, and I love that because I know that my mom and dad did it. Like that's coming from that. I know where that stems from, of my ability to and love of teaching. So again, if your mom was a nurse and your dad whatever, right? Like, and you decided to become a nurse, I mean, that's just gonna happen. In that you can't change that in the way people are, you know what I mean? It's back to your raising of how you were raised and what you in the group you were raised in and everything else. And so, because like, what made you want to be? You don't have to answer; it's rhetorical. But what made you want to be a mom? If it was because you had a good thing and you felt like these are what I wanted to do, like, how is I like you? And you guys definitely have maternal. I know this. You have maternal strings that are tugged on way different than what we do, right? That's the best way I can put it. And you have connections, I feel like, very much different than what men do to their children, right? In different ways. And I think, in my opinion, raising a child, having those two distinct, whether that is, I'm going to say this to be, because I believe it's true, there's two different roles that men and women serve in the raising of a child. That's my opinion, right? And when I say that, I also say the fact that I don't mean it as in the sense of a specific gender. I mean roles that people take on that could potentially mimic this way and mimic that way, right? It's the blending of those two things. So if it's two men raising a child, if it's two women raising a child, there are definitely different avenues and different mixtures of things that you still have to have to come out. That's just my opinion about it. And I think it can be done at any level with either. Doesn't matter to me. So, but it's interesting though of how those roles come out, right? I mean, it's a fascinating topic that you can talk forever about.
It's the same way as just how teams develop. You each, as you mentioned, get a role within a family. Just like if you're in a business team, you each become part of a role. You fill voids. You do what you're good at, right? Same thing within the family. And along with that, I was raised in an incredibly loving, hugging, like feely, touchy type of family. So that's how I am with my kids. My husband came from, they're also very, very loving, but in a little bit different of a way. And so I think, my kids are very feely, touchy, lovey, huggy with me and not as much with Garrett, because that's just, it's just how we present as parents. And
and I think that has to do, and you go back to this of where you were, like, there are definitely traditional places of where you've grown where it wasn't like that as much, right? Like you have traditional, I want to say rural areas that are still very, I would say, a little bit older fashioned in how things were done and how things, you know what I mean? But people stay in those and they know those things. And that's, again, it's not wrong. It's not right. It's their opinion. I would argue with you that new age, like cities where it's I don't want to say liberalism because I don't want it to be like that, but progressive and being different and hey, allowing things to change and openly, freely. Like, I think you're getting some of the same results of people. You're just, it can be done in different ways, right? So there's
Yeah.
different ways that we can end up doing that. So, I mean, we got 5 minutes. I want to wrap up and just, I think you nailed this right from the beginning, right? Humans are gray. We operate in the gray area. I think if we take one step and one little thing, like for us and what we discussed, if the veteran thing, just saying, oh, who's the veteran? Thank you, right? That's it's one step of what you can do to change something. Because I think what we've discussed and what we've brought to ourselves, whether it's in the business world or not, is that there are some major, deep, big problems that are very deep in rich in history of what they are. Nothing that's rich in history and is deep rooted has easy solutions, right? So I guess the thing that I think that we could both agree on is to say just do one small step to change something of whatever that was. And like the best example I think we've come up with today is to say, who's the veteran, and thank that person versus just overall. Now, I'll make a small argument with you. My argument is that being a spouse of a military member is potentially almost harder than being the military member. So that is a sacrifice in itself for service. So I will say that because I know that for a fact. So, but we can get into that another day.
Probably should.
Yeah, we should. So listen, we'll wrap this up. Go ahead.
I have a closing thought I'd like to share.
Yep, absolutely. 100%.
So my husband and I are watching Mad Men right now, and it is so disturbing in so many levels.
Okay.
But it also shows how far we've come in 60 years.
Sure, absolutely.
So going back to your point, I mean, all of these little changes that we can implement are going to continue to improve our society.
Yeah, and I think it's wanting huge change fast probably isn't good on. Now there's some things that should be immediately stopped. I'm not going to say that, but when we're trying to break these things down and bring the barriers down and the walls down, because big change isn't good for anything, right? Like I always use the water theory. We're 70% water, but you could literally kill yourself by drinking too much water. Right. So if that's not good for you, nothing in big things are good for you. So change has to happen over time. It has to be patient.
Go slow to go fast, right?
Americans aren't patient. Let's just be real about that too, right? Like we want things done now and give it to me in my Amazon box. Give it to me now. I need this now, right? And so, but either way, I think that's the point when you look at business and you look at gender gaps, is that change has to be made little bit by little bit, and it has to be accepting. That's the other side of it, right? Put yourself in their shoes, understand, okay, I didn't see it that way because I wasn't, and just be open and understanding about something, and know that someone could come at you with something. To me, this is just, and I know you've felt this too, as much as the person that may be offended, and in this case, let's take a woman and say, if she's you have to be able to present it in a way and know that people aren't going to be accepted at first. It can't just be right. It's the same way as you have to be accepting and you have to be open to it. Because again, change is tough, man. It's just a tough thing to do. So good. Well, listen, June, I think I looked it up. I'm gonna look it up one last time. Laura will be back on July 7th for the Rant. She'll also be back at the end of July to talk about her book. She's now permanent on, so it's us, it's Flip and Laura, and she gets to pick the topic next time, so I don't have to. I love it. So she gets to do that. So that'll be right after the July 4th weekend. So until then, for Laura and I, have a absolutely great rest of your June. I have a good summer starting off. So and we thank you for stopping by today. We appreciate that. Last thoughts? Anything? You good?
I do. I have one more last thought for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think that because we live in a society where we always have to have big dogs and underdogs and all that stuff.
Yep.
Let's say we do become equal with men and women. since that's our topic today. Just be leery about who else you're putting at the bottom.
Because someone's got to, it's got to be, right? I mean,
when you think back, the Italians were that for a while, the Irish, we've always had somebody. So let's stop it.
Yeah, that's oh my God, another big issue. So next time we're going to tackle that in America. So yeah, this is what we're doing. We're just going to change the world little by podcast by podcast, or streamcast by streamcast. Awesome. Listen, thanks for stopping by, everybody. Lions Guide to the Flipside Streamcast Live. Again, thank you to Laura coming on board full time now, and we will see her again on the Rant on July 7th. Otherwise, guys, have a great. We'll see you next week for Dale and I to do the Lions Den. We can get manly, not have this woman on here anymore, so we can be manly again, and our microaggressions won't get under the. I'm kidding. That's all jokes. So. But no, Dale and I are on next week. We can talk about some stuff that's happening. Big news about things like Tesla saying, hey, everybody's got to come back to the workplace if you're an executive. So I'm sure that will be brought up as long as other stuff. So we look forward to seeing you then. Otherwise, have a great week. We'll see you next week on the flip side. And as always, flip out. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.